Namaste. Uh, one of the things that ends up happening whenever I dress like this is people say, wow, you've dressed up. Whereas if I wore a suit, nobody would blink an eye, which goes to show how far we've come from our own identity sometimes, particularly in contexts like this. So why am I here? So I was introduced as a venture capitalist. I was one until about 3 months ago. I quit my job because I saw a problem that I wanted to go after, and so I started my own company. But since I was an investor for well over 4 years, one of the questions that investors should answer, and if any of you have startups, you should ask your investors, is what's your thesis? Right? What's your position in the world? Why are you here? What kind of companies are you looking to back? What kind of problems are you looking to solve? And for me, the thesis begins with India's income pyramid. India is a poor country. It's a fact that when we sit in rooms like this and talk to each other in English, often don't like to acknowledge. And particularly online, if you go ahead and say India is a poor country, you'll have a bunch of nationalist trolls who've, not achieved much in life, also try and say that UNESCO gave us an award that said we were the best. But this is pretty much how India looks, how India lives, how India earns. Please note these numbers are household income numbers, and the average household in India is 4.8 people. So each of those numbers divides by 5 when you're talking about per capita, right? So there are about 72 million people, or 7.2 crores, who earn more than 10 lakh rupees at the household level, which means there are only 7.2 crore people who earn more than 2 lakh rupees per annum per person or more. That's how poor we are. Our GDP per capita is $1,950. China sits at about 8,900, Brazil somewhere around the same. So they're about 4 times richer than us. So this conversation about how far behind we are in China is laughable because we're poor. The US sits at $55,000. So this is something that I keep trying to reinforce, because it's something that the best of this country, which is in this room, you are already in the top 1%, potentially I would say top 0.5 or maybe even top 0.1% of this country, in terms of income, in terms of education, in terms of privilege. And we often keep forgetting what that means. We have a responsibility. Most VC-funded startups are obsessed with the richest 72 million people, because this is a funny statistic, but if you looked at the number of people who earn above 10 lakh rupees per annum at the household level, the number of people who speak English fluently, and the number of people who used to use more than 0.5 GB of data pre-Geo, that number used to be 72 million. It would converge at the same number all the time, which is also, if you're at Flipkart or Paytm, that's probably why your monthly active user count isn't going up above 50, 60 million, right? At least for a reasonable transaction size. That's the market I'm interested in. You'd ask, of course, why am I not interested in the bottom of the pyramid? Because the bottom of the pyramid is so damn poor that they live on 3,500 rupees per annum per person. There's no way you're going to be able to make money off of them. That's why we are a socialist country, by the way. For everyone who aspires to be capitalist, we are so damn poor we can't feed ourselves, and the government needs to feed us. Which is why that bottom is out of the question. You can't do much with it. But the middle is interesting. Middle is interesting for businesses of the future. If you're building businesses for the next 10 years, that's where you should be looking. Baba Ramdev knows that. That's 52 crore people. It's not a small section, right? But again, it's not one country. Bharat ek desh nahi hai. Does anyone have any clue how many languages are there in India? Any guesses? Yeah, well, yes, if you actually count dialects, that number does go up to 3,000, but that's a good guess. It's about 786 languages. 22 are recognized by the Indian Constitution as official languages, so yes, you are right in that regard. But then Tulu or some other language that probably some friend of yours speaks is not listed in that list, and you will hurt their feelings. 29 of them are spoken by at least 1 million people. It's mind-boggling. Only to Indians, it's the most natural thing in the world, right? Yeah, of course, there are so many languages. Whenever I go outside the country and say this, I see a series of O's. And when I tell them I speak 6 or 7 languages, they're like, well, is it 6 or 7? I said, eh. Any guesses on what this represents? And my only clue to you is it's roughly to scale. And again, it's about India, obviously, about Bharat. I thought just in case someone says this is a representation of the retina. No, it's not. That's 1 billion mobile phone connections, about 400 million internet users, or 220 smartphone users. Actually, might be a little bit more now because Xiaomi's been on a tear. 10 lakh people with more than 72 million, right? And that tiny little yellow dot is us. Everyone in this room, that's how big we are in relation to the rest of India. So any illusions or delusions you might have of representing your people, please take a look at this chart. So, we are poor, things are fairly diverse, it's hard to solve for. What does that mean? What does that mean for us? It's all about the change. What's changing? Lots is changing. 5x drop in the entry-level smartphone price, 100x increase in speed, and 100x lower cost per GB. So that's a 10,000x drop in rupee per Mbps. That's what's happened in the last 2 years alone. Right? It's ridiculous, a 10,000x jump. That's 4 orders of magnitude. We have 1 billion Aadhaar numbers. Now, this is something that's been vilified in circles countless times. I myself was part of the early team at Aadhaar. I joined Aadhaar when we were just 30 people back in 2010, about 1 month before the first Aadhaar number was issued. And back then it was an interesting time. Lots of private sector folks had left their jobs. I was there as an unpaid volunteer. I served for a little over a year. Everyone there was there with a sense of mission. The government has done a bunch of messed up things with it, made it mandatory in places where it wasn't designed to be made mandatory, used it in ways that it probably shouldn't have been used. But frankly, one of the things that I like to say about Aadhaar is the way we used to think about, like I said, we're a socialist country, right? So you've got to cut the pie and give the pie to everybody in the country so that they can get their share of subsidies. It's one of the most important governance problems in this country, right? So how do you cut the pie? Our approach before to cutting the pie used to be, we used to cut it up into large chunks and then give it to somebody and say, you cut it up into smaller chunks and then give it to somebody else, and then you cut it up into smaller chunks and so on and so forth. And pie happens to be very tasty, right? So by the time it comes to the end person, there's not even crumbs left. What we built Aadhaar for was, it was a scalpel. You could cut the pie into 1.3 billion pieces and send it directly where it needs to be sent. It still serves that purpose and it does it excellently. And on top of that, the same team that built it, by the way, Aadhaar was designed and built here in Bangalore. It wasn't built in Delhi. That's something that you should know. So the moment you start asking about questions about security, some of the best minds, anyone who's interested in mathematics and random number generation, which is a fascinating problem, how is the Aadhaar number generated? It's an incredibly sophisticated process. The deduplication process, incredibly sophisticated. Again, we are so keen on beating ourselves down and criticizing ourselves that we can't even recognize a good thing when it slaps across our face. Right? On Twitter, you'll see lots of destroy the Aadhaar, and by all means, try. Let's see what the 900 million people who don't earn a quarter of what you do have to say about it. So, the other thing, mother tongues, that's something that we've gone into. Hindi internet is growing 5 times faster. That was 2 years ago. I need to update this deck. It's now growing 10 times faster than the Indian and than the English internet. The ramp is massive. GDP per capita has doubled in the last decade. Here's a scary fact for you. Until 2006, our GDP per capita was lower than that of Pakistan. Anyway, let's come back. So these are some numbers, large numbers. It's India, everything's ramping. This is a very important time. There are more people who are connected, there's more accessibility, there's more banking coverage. Here's an interesting fact. In the last 2 years, half of all bank accounts opened worldwide, 1 in 2 were an Indian bank account. We opened 320 million or 32 crore bank accounts in the last 4 years. That wouldn't have been possible without Aadhaar. So before you go into kind of criticizing public infrastructure, take a pause to look at the impact, right? This is one of my favorite problems. It's a design problem. It is basically the curve of household debt to income. And this is the curve, or the way the curve looks roughly globally. And mostly in the developed world, it actually offers even a neater bell curve. That basically means that your debt peaks when your earning potential is at its peak. Right? For most households, that's how the debt curve should look. When you're earning more, you can be more in debt. Right? What's the story with India? Any clues of how that curve looks for India? Any guesses? It's an S curve. This is what happens to Indian households. This happens because when I'm 50 or 60, suddenly I'll get a heart attack, or I'll get diabetes, or I'll need some dialysis or something, some medical condition. And India's insurance penetration is abysmally low. It's half of the global average. Right? India's insurance penetration is 3.5% of premium underwritten to GDP. There are technical terms, but essentially to say we don't insure ourselves enough. The global average is around 7. That's precisely why it hits us. The second reason, of course, you guys would have guessed first, would be marriage. Right? So somebody has a daughter to get married off, debt comes into play. And that's again because we have some of the lowest penetrations of household savings products. India has an unhealthy obsession with the worst potential savings products across the entire financial spectrum. Any guesses on what those saving products are? Yes, gold. And the other one? Chit fund is a good one, but it doesn't penetrate as much. It's real estate. So real estate and gold both have less than 3% annual yield when you actually look at it over a 20-year horizon. Your savings account will do better. It will do 4%. You just left it in the bank, you'd be better off on a 20-year horizon. Forget doing an FD. You just left it there. You do better off than you did with gold or with real estate. And it so happens that 92% of all household assets are either in real estate or gold. So this is the reason why we are so screwed, why the poor continue to stay poor. So if you're looking to actually design for India's growth, if you're looking to design for India to become richer, for India to become a developed economy, for all this, bravado that we project whenever we go somewhere else, and particularly the insecurity when we feel whenever we speak to someone who's Chinese these days, this is the problem we need to solve. I worked on, after Aadhaar, the team that worked on it sometime in 2014, after we realized that the new government wasn't going to kill it, came back together and started building a bunch of layers on top of Aadhaar, because it was always designed for layered innovation. Right? Layered innovation is one of the most powerful tools that you can have. Your Uber, or any app for that matter, Gojek, I saw a bunch of people from here, is built on layered innovation. Right? If the US didn't build GPS, and then after that, if you didn't have Android, and if you didn't have semiconductors, and then on top of that, you didn't have the internet, if all those layers didn't stack up, there's no way one company could have solved all those problems. Similarly, we had an identity layer. And then on top of that, we had to build a bunch of layers for what we refer to as presence-less, paperless, cashless transactions. Presenceless, why is that important? Because if I have to go somewhere to show my face, for you, that's an inconvenience. Oh God, they make me stand in line to link my Aadhaar. Well, boo-hoo, right? If you're from a village, you have to travel for 30, 40 kilometers on kacha roads, which basically means a day. And time is money. So I've basically lost money. So being presenceless is important. Paperless is again critical because we ourselves find it hard to manage paper. You can imagine how Bharat feels about managing paper. Kagaz is everything for them, by the way. And if they can just have it on their phone, it makes it a lot simpler. Of course, there are problems of digital literacy, which is why I say this is a design problem. How do you make it easy for them to use this and they can have it on one phone and they lose that phone and they log into another phone and how magically all our contacts appear now. All of that, how do you recreate that experience for them? That's something that's a crucial design problem. And the third, of course, is cashless. Cash is a very expensive way to move value, by the way. We have only 4 mints. When demonetization happened, one of the critical mistakes the government actually did was they didn't calculate the time taken to print, pack, transport, and move the money. By the way, do you know how 14 lakh crores looks in terms of, if you were to put 14 lakh crores together? It's about 6 Olympic-sized swimming pools. That's it. 50 meters Olympic-sized swimming pools, about 6 Olympic-sized swimming pools. Imagine in a short period, we have to take 6 Olympic-sized swimming pools and explode it out to the chappa jabba kona of this country. That's a logistical nightmare. So cash is costly for this economy. If you are to grow, the other reason why it's very important is that digital transactions have traceability. Now, to you, that sounds like 1984. That sounds like the government is going to watch everything that you do. And let me be very clear. Having worked with the government, I can tell you very confidently that way before Aadhaar, the government had all the tools needed to figure out who you are, what you are, where you go, what you do. All of that existed long ago. Surveillance at an almost alarmingly accurate level was possible back in the 2000s. Never mind all this. So the traceability for the poor means a credit score. And when I have a credit score, I can borrow much cheaper. Do you know, what interest rates do you guys pay for a loan? Numbers, roughly, personal loan? Personal loan. 21%, 24% on your credit card. Some people will be lucky, get 15% loan. Some people will be even luckier if you're a privileged customer and get 11% loan. But we're talking about that range. The average loan from an informal credit, by the way, if you look at formal data, India's household debt to GDP ratio is about 10%. Global average around 50%. That doesn't mean India doesn't borrow. Of course India borrows, but India borrows from places other than the banks because the banks won't lend to them, won't give them any bhav, right? Pardon the pun. So when you're talking about going to these people, the loan, the interest rate that you get charged, the minimum lease count is 1%, and typically it's about 1% a week. On an annualized basis, that works out to 52%, and that's considered a good loan. People call you Dayavan and Annadata when they give you a 1% loan per week. I've even heard of meter buddy. Buddy is interest in Kannada. Meter buddy is basically interest that keeps increasing with time. It's one of the most cruel constructs I can think of, right? It'll be 1% this week, 2% the next week, 3% the week after. Before you know it, you're just paying interest. Never mind the principal. That's why this is important. What does this mean? So far, distribution costs have essentially influenced or affected product design. They are the ones that determine what size of a loan that I can give you. I'll explain. So a DSA or a broker or an agent, it costs them about 800 to 1200 rupees to reach you, sign the document, get the Xerox, take everything, put it there, and that's what they charge. Now, if I'm a bank or an NBFC and I'm lending, I don't want that distribution cost to be more than 100 bips or 1% of my total ticket size, right? So I've actually assumed that to be smaller, to be 0.5% of the cost. So what is the largest loan I can give you? What is the smallest loan I can give you if my 800 or 1000 rupee or 1500 rupee loan has to be 0.5%. The smallest loan I can give you is 3 lakh rupees. Now what that means is that most people can't afford a 3 lakh rupee loan because there is another set of calculations called the fixed obligation to income ratio, which is how much you have to pay out versus how much you make. The bank will assess it and then figure out whether you can afford this loan or not. So and again, they're only us, we can afford this loan. 3 lakh rupee loan is nothing for us. But for the moment you drop that cost to 100 rupees or to 10 rupees, the addressable market explodes. Sachetization is one of the design principles of India. And since we are kind of sticking with our Indophilia, let's talk about the Eightfold Path. Anybody knows what the Eightfold Path is? Seriously, nobody? Yes, at least somebody's read some scripture. Yes, Buddha had the Eightfold Path. See, these references are lost only on these people. Hopeless. Anyway. Yes, we do need Amar Chitrakatha to make a comeback. I voraciously read them when I was a kid. So sachetization. Less is more. So I'll give you one example, right? So we talked about sachetization of a loan and why that's so important, because otherwise I can't afford it. It has to kind of work. Let's talk about something else. So in 1993, Shaw Wallace, Daru, Officer's Choice, etc., was doing very poorly. I think it was rapidly losing market share. It was in threat of going out of business. And they did one move in the mid-90s that took them from, I think, 7th or 8th in the market share to 2nd in all the markets that they were operating in. Any clue what that one move was? Obviously, it's related to sachetization. So one would think that they actually started selling sachets of booze. No, they weren't that clever. What they did start doing was in South India, they started attaching sachets of pickle along with their booze. So anyone who's Tamilian will tell you Saraku with Urga is one of the nicest things in the world, right? Pickle and rum. But there are several examples of this. Of moment you take sachets, the classic example is FMCG with shampoo sachets. Another example, one of my favorite examples is Gutka. Gutka is a wildly profitable business. How profitable, I'll tell you. The input materials for Gutka are erect nut and tobacco. Erect nut sells for 350 rupees a kilo. Premium X1 tobacco sells at 160 rupees a kilo. Your weighted cost of input raw materials is 200 rupees a kilo. How much does Gutka sell at? Any clues? 5 rupees for a 3.5 gram sachet. So the per kilo cost works out to be about 1,450 rupees, minus 200. So almost 90% margin business. It gets mostly distributed through the channel. So like a distributor will get a cut, the retailer will get a cut, the final cigarette wala will get a cut, which is why it's able to reach. If you were able to sachet and increase the profit margin, then you're able to allocate more to the channel. Because the middleman is important in this country. You're not going to disintermediate any supply chain in this country. Anyone who's laboring under that delusion will wake up to the reality soon enough. The second reality, of course, is uneven cash flows. Not everyone gets a monthly salary. In fact, 90% of India gets no monthly salary. We are the very few salaried people in this country. So what that means is we don't have steady income. So then why the hell would an EMI make sense? Why would an SIP make sense? Why would a monthly subscription make sense? Does a monthly subscription make sense? You guys are all designing products with monthly subscriptions, I'm sure. Right? Why? Because it's easy, because that's what Stripe did, or that's what some other... We have to ditch all paradigms of the West, each and every one. None of them apply to us. We are different. We are 500 different countries. We were 550 different princely states in 1946. Why is it any different today? We just happen to be under one government. The reality of who we are, our identity, is still very fractured. So uneven cash flows and building for this kind of set means that you have to give flexible repayment. You have to give people the ability to pay when they can and use it for whatever period they can. Jio understood this. And they went into instead of saying, we'll give you 60 GB a month, they said, we'll give you 2 GB a day. That was genius. Speed is a feature. When was the last time you guys lived with the feature phone? I think some people do it. Some design guys do it who actually building for the likes of Some of the designers I met from ShareChat or Meesho, or one of them that I said claimed to have lived with a lived with a feature phone for a month, and he was a broken man. No, he wasn't. I was just kidding. But it's very painful, right? If you don't design for speed, if you start layering cool animations and one of my great enemies was Bootstrap, because you could do, if you can't write good CSS, that's the crutch of people who don't know CSS, right? So what? It's only 2 MB or 3 MB extra for the page. It's crazy. 2 MB, 3 MB is like gold. It's time. Time is money. Speed is a feature. Any one of you can build a fast app or a fast product will win. Memory and data is gold. One of my favorite stats again about Indian mobile phone usage was that most users, all of you who've seen the 6-week death curve will know this, or actually the 6-day death curve will see this. You'll have activations and then boom, your cohort will fall off. That's because they don't have storage space on their phone. WhatsApp has used it all up. Right? So you can't have more than 10, 12 apps on their phone. And when you actually list all the apps, you're already 6 of the spots are already taken. So if you're going to go and take that spot, it better be a very small spot. You can slip under the radar when you actually filter by, because people will filter by size, by the way. They know how to do that when they delete things. If you appear lower on that list, better for you. Mother tongues, this is again something that I keep kind of putting it out there, right? Because I have a 9-month-old boy at home. My mother tongue is Konkani, my wife is Bengali, my maid is Tamilian. And then so when we talk to the kid, there's a big temptation to just switch to English, right? Between, at least when we're talking to him and when we're talking to each other. But the fact of the matter is, if you've actually gone into your hometown and negotiated for something, or you've spoken to an auto driver, you've spoken to anybody who is not from your social strata. We're very fond of saying it's a small world. No, it's a very stratified world. You all know each other in some way or the other because you all belong to that same 0.1% or 1%. If you actually go to Russell Market and say, oh, I know you from this guy, no chance that's going to happen, right? Do it for me is greater than DIY. It's a very do-it-for-me country, which is why middlemen are not going anywhere. So you have to learn to design for middlemen. You have to learn to empower middlemen so that you can get retention and coverage on your own app. And I have still a bunch more slides, but we'll stop here because I want to take a few questions. But the last design principle is India lives in the past. We are the only liberals in this country, truly. I mean, there are a few liberals in that segment as well, but when you're talking about progressive values, when you're talking about, socially liberal, fiscally conservative, this is the kind of, LGBT rights and all of this, these things are not important to most of India. To most of India, what's important is how do I get my daughter married? How do I make sure I get them into education? How do I make sure that they are the home for this puja, because otherwise Rahu Kala will come and screw everything. No, but that's what it is, and that's who we are. To be able to design for this, to be able to design for India, there's only one thing that you have to do. Look back to how it was when you were growing up, because we all grew up in that India. We all grew up in Bharat. My house had a Sharda calendar sitting there. We talked about no, this is not a good time. This is a good time for something. How many of you have actually thought about triggering a purchase by calling out that this is a good time to buy because of this astrological condition? Right? Dhanteras has been going on and the jewelers have known it for ages. How many of you actually leverage that? When you're buying a car, Ayudh Puja, this is a good time to buy. Where's the trigger? Leverage and take advantage of our own idiosyncrasies. So anyway, we'll move through all of this and say Jai Hind. I'll take a few questions.